Let me tell you something about Cre Cubs. Something important. Something every species in the known galaxy has learned the hard way. After centuries of disastrous attempts, failed negotiations, and one very embarrassing incident involving the Galactic Council's ambassador and a puddle of green slime. Cre Cubs cannot be babysat. It is not a rule. It is not a law. It is simply a fact of the universe, like gravity or the certainty that if you leave food unattended near a Velpian merchant, you will never see it again. Cre Cubs are small, yes. They are fluffy, if you squint and tilt your head at a very specific angle. But they have claws the size of short swords, jaws that can crack reinforced steel plating, and a roar so powerful it once forced a diplomatic shuttle to reroute mid-flight. So naturally, when Druvac and Scylla decided to hire a babysitter for their two cubs, Rock and Pix, the entire residential block on Station Vora 9 held its collective breath. Druvac was a tall, broad-shouldered Creth male, covered in deep amber scales that caught the artificial station light like polished copper. He paced the main corridor of their housing unit, his clawed feet clicking sharply against the metal floor. His wife, Scylla, sat near the window, her secondary eyelids blinking rapidly, which for a Creth was the equivalent of biting your nails down to nothing. "This is a mistake," Druvac said for the 14th time. "You've said that already," Scylla replied. "Because it is still true. It has not stopped being true. We need one evening," Scylla said firmly. "Just one. The Vora Accord dinner is mandatory, Druvac. The council expects us there. We cannot bring two cubs to a diplomatic function. Not after what happened last time." Druvac released a low, rumbling growl from deep in his chest. The memory was fresh. Pix had eaten the centerpiece. Rock had roared at the High Chancellor. And together, they had dismantled the entire buffet table in under 4 minutes. The footage was still circulating on the station's internal network. Someone had added cheerful music. Druvac had not found it amusing. "Who did you hire?" he asked. "A human," Silas said. The corridor went very, very quiet. "A what?" "A human. Her name is Mara Voss. She came highly recommended through the Interspecies Care Registry. 14 species. Dozens of placements. Perfect record." Druvac stared at his wife for a long moment. "Scylla, our cubs ate through a tungsten-reinforced door last month. For fun. Mara has experience with Brassian Young," Silas said, with the calm confidence of someone who had already committed to the decision and had no intention of reversing it. Druvac opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Brassian Young have acid saliva." "Exactly," Scylla replied. "So she is not easily startled." The door chimed. Both of them turned. Druvac crossed the corridor in 3 strides, placed his massive scaled hand on the panel, and opened it. The human standing in the doorway was small, objectively, almost embarrassingly small. She reached roughly to Druvac's shoulder. Dark brown skin, short curls pulled back with a bright orange clip shaped like a sun. She carried a bag that rattled and clanked with every movement, as though it contained objects that had no business existing in the same space together. She looked up at Druvac. She did not flinch. She did not step back. She did not react the way most beings did when confronted by a 7-foot Creth with scales, fangs, and visible parental anxiety. She smiled, broadly, easily, like this was Tuesday. "Hey," she said, "you must be Druvac. I'm Mara. Where are the little ones?" Druvac opened his mouth to answer. From deep inside the housing unit, a roar exploded through the corridor, shaking the walls. A second roar joined it. Something crashed, then something else, then the unmistakable sound of something large being hurled across a room. Mara tilted her head slightly, listening. Her smile did not waver. She adjusted the strap of her bag and looked up at Druvac with calm, steady eyes. "Okay," she said simply. "I can work with that." Druvac looked at Scylla. Scylla looked at Druvac. Neither of them spoke. "Because what, exactly, do you say when a creature a quarter of your size walks into your home, hears your children dismantling the furniture, and responds with the mild energy of someone informed there might be light rain later?" Mara was already walking inside. Druvac and Scylla left at exactly the time they were supposed to. Not because they felt confident. Not because they felt good about the situation. But because Mara had looked at them, pointed at the door with one finger, and said, "Go. I've got this." And something in the way she said it made arguing feel genuinely pointless. They made it approximately 40 steps down the corridor before Druvak stopped walking. "We should go back," he said. "We are not going back," Sila replied. Sila. Rock knocked a security drone unconscious last week with his forehead. On purpose. Mara handled Brassian Young, Sila repeated, mostly to herself now, like a prayer. Brassian Young have acid saliva. They walked to the Accord dinner. They sat in their assigned seats. They smiled at the right people, nodded at the right moments, and said the correct diplomatic things at the correct diplomatic times. And every second of it, both of them were listening for a distant explosion, or a distress signal, or a call from station security. None came, which was somehow more terrifying. Back in the housing unit, things had started exactly as expected. Rock and Pix sized Mara up the moment she stepped into the main room. Rock was the older one, broader, with scales just starting to come in along his shoulders, dark green and catching the light. Pix was smaller, faster, and had the particular look in her eyes that all younger siblings have, regardless of species. The look of someone who has already decided that whatever happens next is going to be entertaining for at least one of the people present. Rock roared at her. Full volume. No warning. The kind of roar that rattled picture frames and sent a stack of data pads sliding off the shelf. Mara did not blink. She set her bag down slowly, deliberately, looked Rock directly in the eyes, pulled in a breath, and roared back. It wasn't the same volume. Rock had the advantage of a chest cavity roughly the size of a storage container. But what Mara's roar lacked in sheer decibels, it made up for in complete, total, unapologetic commitment. She didn't hesitate. She didn't soften it. She went full, open-mouthed, shoulders back, zero embarrassment roar, holding it for a solid 4 seconds. The room went silent. Rock stared at her. Pix stared at her. Mara straightened, smoothed the front of her shirt, and said calmly, "Okay, now that we've said hello, who wants to make something?" There was a pause. The kind of pause that only happens when the universe recalibrates. Pix said, very quietly, "Make what?" "Depends," Mara replied, reaching into her bag and pulling out a container of something that smelled aggressively good, even to a species with entirely different taste receptors. "Do you two like things that explode? Or things that just look like they might explode?" Another pause. "Both," Rock said slowly, the cautious tone of someone who suspects a trap but is far too curious not to step into it. "Perfect," Mara said. "How about a recipe?" What followed was, by any reasonable measurement, one of the stranger evenings Station Vora 9 had ever hosted. From that one impossibly full bag, Mara produced ingredients, tools, a palm-sized heat source, an instruction she claimed had come from a Dorvani chef who had specifically said they were not intended for children, but had not technically explained why. She let Rock handle the parts that required force. He was good at those. She let Pix handle the parts that required precision, because Pix, it turned out, possessed an almost frightening level of focus when something genuinely interested her. Together, the three of them created something that was not quite food, not quite an experiment, but was absolutely, completely, and 100% something that bubbled deep purple and, when the lid was lifted, made a sound exactly like a very startled bird. Both cubs lost their minds with delight. Rock laughed so hard he knocked over a chair. Pix laughed so hard she accidentally scored a shallow line into the countertop, then froze, stared at it guiltily, and looked up at Mara. Mara simply handed her a cloth. "We'll clean it up before your parents get back." Like it was obvious. Like that was simply what you did. By the time Druvak and Sila returned from the Accord dinner, both cubs were on the main floor, full, settled, and engaged in a heated but quiet debate about whether the purple bubbling creation would have made a better sound if they had added the third ingredient before the second. Mara sat on the couch, completely at ease, scrolling through a small datapad. Druvak stood in the doorway and stared. Sila stood behind him and stared. Mara looked up. "How was dinner?" "Fine," Druvak said slowly, like the word had weight. His eyes moved from Rock to Pix to the clean room to the faint scratch on the countertop, partially but not entirely buffed out. They were good. They were great, Mara said simply. Rock has incredible instincts under pressure, and Pix has the kind of focused attention most adults would envy. She stood, picked up her bag, and slung it over her shoulder. Same time next week. Druvac looked at Scylla. Scylla looked at Rock and Pix, still quietly debating ingredient order, completely unbothered, which, prior to tonight, had literally never happened after an evening without their parents. Yes, Scylla said. Mara nodded, said goodbye to the Cubs, and walked out. Druvac closed the door behind her. He stood there for a moment, then turned to his wife. She roared back. He said quietly, still processing it. She roared back, Scylla confirmed. From a floor, without looking up from their debate, Pix said she was cool. Rock considered this with the gravity only an older sibling can summon, the full weight of someone whose entire reputation depends on not agreeing too easily. Then he gave a small, slow nod. Yeah, he said. She was cool. Druvac looked at the scratch on the countertop, then at his Cubs, calm, fed, genuinely happy. He sat down, exhaled the breath he felt like he had been holding all evening, and decided quietly that some things in the universe were still worth being surprised by. Across the galaxy, predators rule with teeth and terror. But humans? Humans don't need either. We just need a reason.